Hey, everybody. My name is Jennifer Gregson, and welcome to the very first official episode of the Indie Author Book Club. I am here today with Hannah Pennington, and I'm going to just read her bio so that we get her introduced the correct way. She was born in Dallas, Texas, and moved around the country ever since. She started writing stories at the age of 7. That's impressive, and began building the foundations of her debut trilogy at 11. Wow. She is passionate about fantasy and allegories, and she currently lives in Oklahoma with plans for more novels to come. Hello, Hannah. It's nice to have you here on this very first episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I thoroughly enjoyed reading Prisoners of Thornbrill, so I have to know, um, in your own words, can you tell us a little bit about the book and what inspired you to write this fun adventure story about dragons?
Sure. So, Prison of Thornbrill is a young adult portal fantasy, I guess kind of upper young adult, kind of, just due to the age of the characters. And it was heavily inspired by Narnia with How to Train Your Dragon. So, I had first seen the
Nice.
the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, and I was obsessed with the friendship and like secrecy side of that plot. And I wanted to run with it, but put a Narnia twist on it with siblings and another world, but set in current day with siblings that are a little bit older than the Pevensies were. And that's kind of what I was starting to play with when I began the series. And then it became this story of two siblings, Jason and Melanie, who find a dragon egg and they have to secretly raise the dragon in the Grand Canyon. And, all seems to be going well until with the world where the dragon was sent from to save his life decided to suck them all back. And now they're trapped in Tandoria, enslaved by the ruthless high huntress Helena of Thornbrill.
Yeah, she was fun to hate.
Nice.
She was definitely a fun to hate character. Um, so I'm going to skip around in my questions because I really want to know that, you know, did you just totally make up your dragon lore? Did you research, sort of other dragon lore? I know there's How to Train Your Dragon, which is totally fun, but also a cartoon. So I would love to know a little bit about your process with that.
Sure. So I happen to prefer more of like dragons are just like animals rather than like a creature like Smaug, which has like more lore. It's more personified in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Bach. I like more of like their more beast side because like Toothless doesn't speak, but he still has so much character versus somebody like Smaug, which I love Smaug, but like for the setting of my book, it just worked if like he didn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of
But
where
there is some communication,
there
which
is
I
communication.
thought was an interesting way that you did it. It was sort of like telepathically.
Yes, kind of. It's more of like a
Yeah.
link parts. They can kind of feel emotions in a sense.
Yeah.
Um, so, but obviously without speaking. I mean, they can kind of understand, but like there's no on-page dialogue from the
Right.
dragon. Um,
Yeah.
I like that worked better for the setting because sometimes some books, like especially those for, like for younger audiences, a talking dragon is fine. But if you're, for me personally, I feel like that's better for more like immature audiences. I feel like it could come. It's riskier for me. It's a risk where my writing might make it come off more immature if the dragon talked, and I wasn't too
Mm.
ill set to like write that creature in a way because like I've never really been like a huge animal person, so that might have helped me if I was. But so what kind of started off building this character as a dragon was, is he going to talk or no? The answer was no. Okay, we're going to lead more towards like fantastical beast rather than like magical character. And I really didn't have a whole lot of lore because they were kind of treated more just really big predators of the forest and mountain area. But
Right.
I expanded on them. Obviously, they are dragons, so I did want to give them some sort of magical element. And um, that is expanded on throughout the trilogy. So it's hinted a lot what this magic is, with Scalade, but we don't really know exactly what it is, other than it's really important because he's a very rare breed of dragon, the only kind that has this magic, and that's why the high
Oh,
badly. So I wanted to toy with that, and basically,
interesting.
mm-hmm. So that's kind of, and the lore isn't super deep. I wanted to keep it mostly, I didn't want to give a whole ton of information and like drown the reader in like world building, especially because it was my debut. I kind of wanted to play it safe, just keep it more engaging with like action and adventure, and simple to understand, and just like more easily enjoyed without being like, oh, I have to keep track of all this stuff, which is great
Right.
if you're a writer. But for me, I wanted to basically keep it simple for most ages to enjoy.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did you keep it organized, or how did you balance it between like the world building and the character driven story? Because, there is an adventure story going on. So how did you sort of balance those out? Did you like, was that very meticulously planned, or
It kind of came naturally to me. I
yeah,
think what happened was is that I am very plot driven. Like in my mind, I see events before I see the characters' growth through them. So whenever,
gotcha.
like my writing process, I'm a plotter. So I plot events first, and then I go through and be like, okay, the next step is to be like, how are the characters growing? How are they reacting? How is their arc developing through these events? And through the events of the book, the different plot beats, is kind of when like I'll drop world building lore or character development and just kind of weave it through that first. But I'm very plot driven as a first step, and everything else just kind of falls into place after that.
Well, that's interesting. So that leads into my next question is what kind of writer are you? So you told us you're a plotter.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a like are you sort of a everything on a big chart? Are you like, I need the basics of an outline and I'm good to go? Like, how in depth of a plotter are you?
Pretty in depth. I had my whole book of sticky notes.
Wow,
So,
that's fun.
but I will say that the writing book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, was a huge help in basically pacing, because the very first draft
Mhm.
one, I felt like the pacing was something off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then another character just didn't seem to be, they're very passive. They just kind of like floated through the plot. I'm like, where can I find like initiative? And so then I read that book and I was like, okay, I need to redo this whole thing with this. And that really helped me. So I had color coded sticky notes. I plot as much as I can of every possible thing first, because it's much easier to edit a whole book when it's an 800-word outline versus an 80,000-word manuscript. It's easier to fill.
That is that is very true because I have thrown away 70,000 words and started over. So it's rough. Save the Cat Writes a Novel is also how I outline. So that's funny.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really great book. I recommend it to anybody. Like somebody reached out to me, he's like, I'm really stuck with my book. Like something's missing. I'm like, that's what I thought. I couldn't put my finger on it. Read this book, please. It saved
Yeah,
me.
it's detailed. And then they have a new one, Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel. So it
I've heard.
actually, yeah, I have not read it yet, but I have
Mhm.
it. I was like, I need to read that before I finish this book because it goes into very specific YA examples, which I think would be helpful. So tip from me to you. Um, so do you have any rituals? Like, do you have to sit in the same place to write? Do you have to go out of your house? Do you need a cup of coffee? Like, do you have any little quirks?
Um, I guess mine would be that I don't have any. Since having kids, it's pretty much like whatever free time I get, I will just make it work. Whether that's in the car during like a physical therapy appointment, and I'm like typing on my phone, which can get tiring.
Yeah.
On that, I need a big screen for like my big ideas. So
Yeah.
most of the time I write on a computer on my desk, and that's kind of like my default position. But like I really don't have like, oh, I have to have this candle, I have to have this cup of coffee, I have to have like headphones in. Like I'll listen to like soundtracks if I want to.
Mm.
Most of the time it's just like, oh, I think I have 20 minutes to write. Let me just make this work and just like sit down. Don't have time to set the mood. Just get words on a paper that I can edit later because, as everybody knows, you can't edit a blank page.
Very
So,
true. Yeah, no, it definitely changes when your kids are little. See, mine's 13. It's a little different now because he's older. He can do his own thing. I can have more of a set schedule, but yeah,
mhm.
when they're little, whoo, you do what you can. Very,
Yes,
very true. Yeah,
possible to get all three kids down for a nap today.
right. Exactly. Um, so while we're talking about the indie authorhood, what is one piece of advice that you can give other indie authors?
That would be to, if you have to spend money on something, because obviously it is kind of an expensive undertaking to be an indie author because everything falls on us. Would be, if you have to spend money on anything, please, please be an editor. Like
I agree. Yeah,
there are people that, you can just feel that it might not be professionally polished, or and just like even just by like the bio or like the description of the book. Because that's like one of the big things. Yes, people say, yes, a cover is important, but a lot of times, if people who've read the book, especially if like an ebook or something like that, where like maybe like the cover isn't like on a shelf, the story is really what is the book, and you basically want to invest as much effort as possible to make that the most important thing. Cover would be second. If you have the funds, both professional editing and a well done cover would be my biggest advice. I've seen so many people skimp, especially like favoring AI over like hiring a professional person. People can tell. People will
hmm
blacklist you from their own libraries. They will just not support that. Some people might, but from the majority that I'm seeing in my circles, is like that's an automatic no.
yeah,
So, advice I would give to indie authors is invest a good amount of money, or invest money in a good editor,
yeah,
because that's what's important in the end. Because you can have a book without a cover, it just, because the story is the pages, so you want to make sure
right.
that those pages.
Yeah, you need to make sure that the story is well received, and
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I
Yes,
agree. I'm totally the same way. That is what I spend my money on, is a very good editor. So
right. Like if you can't afford a cover, honestly, like just like a textured background with a catchy title will do the work for you. You just want, once they start reading it, that's kind of like, that's the main point of the book, is
yeah,
the
that's
story.
what's going to get you the bad reviews, is if the story doesn't seem professional. Yeah,
Hmm.
I hardly ever see reviews about a cover. I mean, there are, but because people are strange, but it's rare.
That's it. Yes, it's a very good point.
Yeah,
That reviews and what people talk about are the content, not so much the cover.
the cover. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you get some weirdo that's like, "Oh, I didn't like this book because of the cover," and you're like, "But how was the book, man?"
The about covers, or if it's like a limited edition of an already established published book, like, oh, I don't like the limited edition covers, but like I don't see them making it to reviews from what I've seen. Obviously,
Yeah, very
there are
true.
millions of reviews around the world from millions of books.
True. Um, what has been the most surprising part of your indie author journey?
Um, Probably publishing the first time, and then realizing that I had no idea what I was doing, and then I unpublished everything and started all over.
Wow.
Yes.
That's wow. Okay.
So somewhere out there in the world, there's maybe like a dozen copies of the first edition of Prisoners of Thornville. It had different font typography, and it was not professionally edited. That's why I'm telling everybody, please edit it now. Um, I mean, it was self-edited, and then I put it through like my mom and my dad. And my dad does like some level of editing for like his company, but it's not like novel editing.
Right.
uh, but and I did not know anything about publishing. I thought like, okay, I have my manuscript done. It's on Amazon. I'll click publish. Cool. Amazon will now take care of it for me.
Right.
Oh,
No.
that
No.
is, and then after that, I joined Instagram, and then or Bookstagram specifically, and I was like, oh my goodness, I missed so much.
So much.
And then I got one review that said, the story's solid, but it definitely needed some editing. That really stuck with me, and I was like, oh, I've always wondered what my book would be like if I had it professionally edited. So after a lot of thinking and then like a failed Kickstarter and then a successful Kickstarter, I like unpublished everything, redesigned the typography because I realized it actually did not have commercial rights to use that typeface. And it was too much
Oh,
to pay the artist for rights because she was doing it in some like archaic way where I had to like send mail over to Germany for like a currency exchange and then wait for paperwork to come back. So I'm like, I'm just going to change the font to something more accessible. So that's what became the new cover. And yeah, it's just kind of been an up and really big roller coaster, but
yeah.
published, I like knew everything. I knew about beta readers. I knew which editors I was going to use. I knew about a launch strategy. I knew about keywords on Amazon. And I actually jumped to like number 2 and 3 in 3 different Amazon categories. So it's 2, 2, and 3.
Nice. Nice. That's exciting. Yeah, that's exciting. So I have three books. My last book hit number one. It was the first book to do that. And I was like, that's exciting. I can take a picture of that, show everybody that I hit number one. It was on there for 2 days and then it never hit again. But darn it, it hit.
That counts.
Yeah, it counts. It's exciting. I got the little orange banner. But it's nice when you can hit those higher numbers and keep on the sort of Amazon shelf for a little bit longer.
Hmm.
Yeah. So when you think of marketing, because that is my least favorite, and I talk about that a lot on this channel, is how to get through the mindset with marketing and how to get over imposter syndrome and what what has worked for you, what has not worked for you, what do you sort of feel about marketing in general?
There are days where like I love it, and there are other days where like I wish I didn't have to do this because I feel like it's just calling into the void. Especially with
Yeah.
all algorithm changes, we're like, oh, this week I'm doing really well, and then they'll roll out an update, and then it's like everybody's gone. But what
Yeah, it's
worked
frustrating.
for my particular audience, it seemed that like skits worked really well for me. So I have a Reels series that I was doing that was called Starbooks. And it was like a skit of like, what if you could order books through a drive-through like Starbucks? And in that way, I also
Okay,
advertise.
I'm looking that up. That's funny.
I actually will advertise or like promote books that I've read, specifically other indie authors. So it's my way of sharing the word, spreading the word about other indie authors that I like, and that like I've loved their books. And that those took off. I think I had one. They were all in like the 100,000 views, which was really great for me. And I think the best one, I think, was almost to 1 million views. I think it was like 980,000.
Whoa.
Yes. And those got me a lot of followers as well. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, probably what a lot of people think, follower count does not equal sale. So I might have 20,000 followers, but I'm only selling like maybe 1 or 2 copies a month. So
Yeah.
I would tell indie authors is like, despite what you think other people are selling because of their follower count, it's probably not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Follower count definitely helps with a lot of things. Like if you're going to do collaborations or you're going to reach out to other people to do any kind of co-networking, I think that helps. But yeah, it definitely doesn't always equal sales.
Yeah, follower count is great for credibility for doing other social media related things, but in terms of book
Yeah.
sales, not really. I mean, if you have a reel go viral, then you might see like a little spike in sales, but then it just goes back down again
Yeah.
after that dies down. But follower count is obviously a good thing to have. But in terms of marketing, it changes from week to week, really. I mean, right now I'm kind of on a hiatus. I just haven't been able to convince myself to go back in and just churn out content, just keep showing up. I tell everybody to just show up on a schedule that you can comfortably maintain because consistency is really what gets you, whether that's once a week post or everyday posting. Obviously, the more frequently you post, the more quickly you will grow. But consistency is really what drives um, reach because people will then come to associate, oh, so and so, they post this many times, or oh, so and so, they post on this day. And then they'll begin to anticipate what you share. And so I started out small. I think I started like every other day of the week I would post.
Mm,
I increased it to just the weekdays, and then I did every day but Sunday, and that's kind of where I was staying at. I had like a content calendar that I would follow, so like each day of the week. So like Monday will be like a transition with some fates of transition, and then Tuesday will be like what are the tropes? I like a reel about the tropes of my book. Wednesday will be like a character spotlight, and Thursday will be like, oh, here's a book review from somebody else that either about my book or me reviewing another indie author. And then like Friday will be like something more niche, like, oh, no spice fantasy. This is what I write. And then Saturday's kind of like my skit, funny, humorous posting day. So that's kind of what helped me figure like, oh, what do I post? Well, break down each day and then just assign each day of the week or whatever day of the week you post, whatever your schedule, whatever your posting schedule is, assign a theme to help narrow it down rather than just be like, there's so many things that I could post it
yeah.
at. Break down what people want to see about books. People want to see tropes. People want to see the characters. People want to see artwork. So people want to see
Mm,
a lot of people want to see people's face. I know people like to do
hmm.
like faceless Instagram profiles, which can work, but it's very hard to grow, especially when like a book and the author kind of go hand in hand. So people want to see
Hmm.
who meet you, and that also
Yeah.
builds a lot. When they can assign a face to the book and the brand, we human beings are just naturally drawn to other people's faces. So that's the thing that has worked for me is having a content schedule, a theme assigned to each day that I post, and basically plan out a whole month if I can, and then set aside a week just to film everything, and then sit back and as each day comes, just post.
Post.
Uh,
Yeah.
a content calendar, consistency, and a lot of patience and perseverance.
Yeah. I think that's the big one right there is the patience because it is a little bit slow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can definitely be slow. And then when you hit, you hit. But again, it doesn't always equal sales, but it does equal engagement. It equals community, which is
It does.
important. It is very important since we write by ourselves and it's hard to connect sometimes with other people. So social media is a great place for that. So even if you're not getting
Mm-hmm.
sales, if you're getting something out of the social media, it's not a total waste of time. Yeah.
Yeah, huge. That's one of the biggest things that I treasure out of joining social media, specifically for like book things, is the community that I found of other like-minded authors and other similar genre authors. Is that we have all kind of like coalesced together. We're like, oh, my review, my views are down, or like, oh, it's fine, we love you, and you still have like that stuff like
Yeah.
in the void of the internet.
Right. Or if you're just having a bad day,
Of
you can
course, yeah.
reach out and
Mhm.
they totally understand where you're coming from because we've all had those days. Yeah.
Yeah, and advice for publishing. It's been amazing to have a community.
Yeah. Um, okay, I'm gonna go back a little bit to your book specifically, and I know that this is old, so hopefully you'll remember, but what was the hardest scene to write?
From book one, I'm
Yeah,
trying to.
I know.
Uh,
It's like go back in your mind because I know that you probably wrote this book how many years ago?
I don't know if I had like a hard point. I think everything that book has been over like 15 years in the making. So like a lot of things were written and a lot of things got scrapped and some things just kind of came out of the blue. And as far back as I can remember, I think I had ironed it out enough where like I knew all the events, I knew like the plots, so, like I wasn't coming across anything that was hard to write. I think the hardest part was coming up, expanding on the first part of the book because
Mm,
for one of the first drafts, I just had a time jump. I was like 5 years later. And a lot of beta readers were like, hey, hang on, we want to see what happened in those 5 years. So I was like, oh, I got to come up with stuff to fill that 5 year gap. I never thought about it. So, like, going back in and trying to come up with things, what are some things that would be relevant to the plot? What are some things that I can come up with that will impact the future books through this character because of this?
mm,
So, because what would happen there if I were expanding on it? That's more screen time for characters. That's more character arc exposure, more character growth. and I wanted to make sure that what I put in there was relevant and did support the plot, especially in the books that came after. And I think that was probably, it wasn't difficult in terms of like, oh, I can't figure out what to write. It's more of like writing, the writing part was fine. It was coming up with ideas of what to put in there that wasn't just fluff. I didn't
Right,
want it to be filler, but what I
right.
did was probably one of my favorite parts of the book was seeing the characters grow through those 5 years with this dragon because that's the
Yeah,
first.
it was definitely one of my favorite parts
Yeah,
was
it's because it
watching
was
watching the three of them kind of figure life out.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that was definitely probably the more time consuming part. I don't think it was so much as difficult, but I just didn't want to get lost and have it take forever because I had already published
Mm,
before and I didn't want to wait any longer. So adding more things for me to write, I think is what was difficult for me to overcome was um, pacing myself. Like, okay, yes, I want to release the book, but waiting even longer to add this important bit, I think was the actual difficult part.
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, you said you're a plotter and that you really like to plot out. How much of the next books did you know when you wrote the first book?
Um, so I really didn't have, so when I wrote the first book, I knew it was going to be a trilogy from the very beginning, but I didn't think that I needed to plot the second and third book. I feel like, oh yeah, it would just come naturally. I'm going to write the first book, see how it ends, and just maybe find
Roll
some
into the next one.
plot to expand on in the next book. So when I finished the very first manuscript of book one, I was like, okay, cool. That's going to be edited by mom and dad. This is when I was probably around like 15, maybe between 14 and 16, I think is whenever I started writing book two. And very interestingly, I borrowed a bunch of really big hard drives from my dad because I was trying to find the original manuscripts of all of my books.
Oh my
And
God.
I finally found them and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so surreal walking down. Like, oh my gosh, I forgot I wrote this scene. Oh my gosh, I forgot I wrote that cringy line of dialogue. And the book two manuscript, which I finally found, and it is so vastly different compared to what I ended up having. The first draft of the second book, the plot was so aimless. Like you could tell I had no idea what I wanted to do with the plot. But um, yeah, I really did plot out the entire trilogy like I should have when I first began writing the series. But now I know better. And after I unpublished book one, and book two, actually, I had both books out before I unpublished. So, um,
Interesting.
and as I was doing edits and rewrites, like major rewrites, I was having the trilogy as a whole in my mind to every change that I made. I'm like, oh, if I do this little seemingly insignificant thing in book one, I can blow up. That will be hugely impactful to books two and three. And so that was kind of, I went from having no plan for the trilogy to keeping the series as a whole in my mind when I plotted all three books. So I typically had like a very pivotal scene is kind of what I built the following books around. So I like book one, and then I'd be driving home,
Interesting.
see something, and be like, oh, like for example, there was a power plant that I would drive by when I was on my way to my uh, trade school. And one morning, it was just like this, smokestack or whatever it was, peeping above the fog from the nearby river. And it was like dawn. So it was like pastel blue and pink and just like white out, except for the singular tower peeking through. And like that image just changed my entire route for plot for book two. So that's kind of
Interesting.
so that like singular image is like what inspired me to build all around book two. And then there was something else for book three that I was like, oh, that would be cool if I did that. It was like either a simple fleeting scene that I made up entirely, or I would see something. And I wanted to find ways to mold those scenes into a plot that would make sense. And so
Mm,
I had a vibe for what the subsequent books would be.
right.
And I just kind of built around that as with the trilogy in my mind as a whole.
So are all three books available now? I've read the first one, but have all three of them? Are they all out?
So only book two and only book one and two are available right now. I'm hoping for a fall slash winter release for book three. Um,
Exciting.
yeah, I'm about 89% done with the first draft of, or yeah, the first draft of book three. I have my editor scheduled for August. And if all goes well, I'll do a Kickstarter around the same time for limited editions like I did with the first two.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So if all goes well, a winter 2025 release. So we
Nice.
shall.
Exciting. Very exciting.
And the audiobook is available for book one as well. Audiobook for book two
Oh,
is,
nice.
I'm hoping I can approve the files for the book two audiobook towards the end of, I'm looking at May, hopefully, because the files are
Oh,
done. I have
fun.
to, so that should be coming really soon. But yeah, books one
Do
and two are.
you Are you the narrator or did you get someone else to narrate it?
No, actually, I went with an actual narrator. I would have done it myself, but I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
So I hired a narrator. It's Audrey Winehouse. She's kind of new to the industry.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. So look for that. And before I forget, you can find all of Hannah's contact information in the description box below. So you can join her newsletter. You can follow her on Instagram. I don't remember what else is down there, but there's all the links that you can find, Hannah, are in the description box below. So before I forget, I do want to let everyone know. So go over and follow her so that you can find out when her third book is out. That's exciting. So,
Also,
um,
themed merch on my website as well. So I've got like
yes.
bookmarks.
Okay. Oh, fun. I am thinking about doing that for my series that's coming up. I started designing some bookmarks in Canva one day for fun. And yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to doing some merch for my series. So yeah, that's exciting.
So I've got character art prints as well.
Oh, fun. Okay. I'll have to check that out. That's exciting. So I have two last questions.
Mhm.
One is if you were to have your own personal dragon right here in your house, what kind of dragon would it be? What color and what would its power be?
Hmm. Um, I would go with probably like a default dragon. It's like not a wyvern, not like a drake, but like the typical four-legged dragon.
Okay.
Probably similar to Scalade size. So like for the people who haven't read it, I'm trying to think of a comparable size dragon. I guess like toothless size, maybe
Yeah.
smaller, but like a rideable size. And
Right.
thinking probably like a pinkish orangish gold kind of color, kind of like a sunsetty.
Pretty. That's
Um,
pretty.
and what was the rest of the question?
Would it have any powers or magic or
Ah, well, I mean, considering flight would already be very handy.
that's true.
I'm trying to think of anything else. Telepathy would probably, or
Ooh.
I mean, like being able to like
Yeah.
move things. So that's always kind of like
Nice.
feel like would be really
It'd be
handy.
handy. Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be very handy. And then the last question that I will be asking all of my indie authors is what was the last book you read? And was it fiction or nonfiction?
So the last book that I read, the last traditionally book I read was Mistborn. Absolutely amazing.
Mm,
I recommend it to anybody. It's just such a well done series. It's just like the right amount of action, the right amount of romance for me at least, which means it's a subplot. and
right.
um but like the action and like the characters and how everything, like the world building, everything is just like 5 stars for me. And
Nice.
uh, yeah, and that's by Brandon Sanderson. And
Yeah.
then the last indie book I read was Dark Whisperings by Maria Dembowski, and that's
Ooh.
an audiobook. And the narrator was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed his narration. And that book was a fun read. It's about um, these monsters that use people's dreams as a gateway into the real world. And you either have to kill them in your dreams or they escape, and then you got to kill them in the real world, which is way more dangerous. So that
Oh,
was a
that
that
sounds interesting.
Yeah, so I love that premise. So then I listened to both books. I believe there's a third one coming out, um, but I think she just released the second one. So I don't know much about if there's.
When, yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you for being the very first author again in my monthly indie author book club. Again, if you would like to follow Hannah or grab her freebie, all of the links are in the box below. I will also have links to her first book, Prisoners of Thornborough, which I loved. I had the best time reading it. So thank you so much for agreeing to be here today. And I make videos every Friday, so hit that subscribe button and I will talk to you later.